And welcome, you're watching Head to Head. I'm Antonina Antosha with UATV. Ambassadors of the G7 countries have called on incumbent Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko to ensure a smooth transition of power to President-elect Volodymyr Zelensky, enabling Ukraine to continue its chosen path of reforms. Also, ambassadors named successful and important reforms that have been made during the last 5 years. Among those mentioned were decentralization, reforms in the banking and energy sectors. To discuss this, we're joined in the studio today by Miklosh. He's the chairman of the Strategic Advisory Group for Supporting Ukrainian Reforms. Hello, and thank you for joining us.
Hello, thank you for inviting me.
So in your personal opinion, what are the most effective reforms that have been implemented in Ukraine over the past 5 years?
Yeah, in addition to this, what was said, like decentralization, energy sector and banking sector, very important achievement is macroeconomic stabilization, which means also introducing floating flat rate, which is very important because before Ukraine had fixed rate, which was manipulated by the government, by the central bank before. Then very important is making under control inflation, stabilization of the currency rate, cleaning banking sector as it was said, and then some structural reforms. For instance, very important, very sensitive everywhere reform is pension reform, which was done successfully in Ukraine. Let's look at even in kind of non-democratic countries like Russia. It is difficult to introduce this kind of reform. Then another important reform is healthcare reform, which was done, education reform, then partially also deregulation and improvement of business environment. These are achievements and really important results. Very important will be to not only to do reforms also in areas which it is not sufficient progress until now, but very important will be but very important will be also to protect what was done, because sometimes it can be under threat for the future. And areas which are still insufficient progress we have, firstly and the most importantly, it is law enforcement and property right protection, which is connected also with the fighting against corruption, especially in this persecution part of the fighting against corruption. This is very important, not only from point of view of stability and feeling of just, but it is also very important because it is precondition for investment, especially foreign direct investment. And foreign direct investment are one of the most important preconditions for high and sustainable economic growth and improving the living standards and quality of life of Ukrainians. Then we still have insufficient progress in privatization. Ukraine still has a lot of state-owned companies, thousands of state-owned companies. Now they are the biggest source of corruption, these companies. This is not only my opinion, this is opinion of NABU, which is repeatedly arguing this. Some areas of corruption, big corruption, have been closed during the last 5 years. It was gas tariffs, for instance, big gap between regulated and market price. It was public procurement, where Prozoro really changed the system. It is banking sector, which was cleaned up. Then it is value-added tax return, which was also changed. But now the biggest source of corruption are state-owned enterprises. And also transparent and professional privatization of these companies can bring a lot of direct investment and strategic investors who will bring money not only for the state budget by paying for these companies, but also for restructuring and investment of the companies, which are, many of them are lagging behind, they're not modern, and they need restructuring, they need investment. Then another area which will be decisively important is land market. I mean land market liberalization, because as we know, until now, Ukraine doesn't have market with the land. It is prohibition of the selling. Even privately owned land is not allowed to sell. And absence of this market is creating a lot of distortions, deformations, again, space for corruption, but also is not allowing to develop, especially rural areas which are less developed. Then
what about judiciary?
Then judiciary is in the first. It is this law enforcement it is also. It is not only judiciary. It is also SBU. It is also prosecution. It is everything. This, which means all these institutions, which have to enforce the law, and not only. It is necessary also to remove them from some activities which are not protecting public interest, but which are on the contrary, the tool for corruption, like if fiscal police have competency to interfere in the everyday business and misuse this power, which means this was in this first condition what I said is the most important, most difficult at the same time, but most important because without this we will not have progress. Then we have some areas in which there is partial progress, but it is necessary to continue. Energy sector is one very good example. It is necessary to open this sector for investment. It is necessary also demonopolize it. It is necessary to restructure these big companies like Naftogaz, unbundling Naftogaz, but also, for instance, Ukrzheleznica. It is necessary to restructure this company, and it is necessary to create conditions for competition there as well, for domestic, foreign companies, for providing personal transport, cargo, and so on and so on. These are the most important. Then, of course, we have areas like custom, which is another big source of corruption, which not enough was done in this area, as tax reform, public administration reform, which is very important. But I think the most important are these first four, what I have mentioned.
And these four most important reforms that you have mentioned, or the fields of reforms that you have mentioned, would you say that those are achievements or the results of the incumbent president of Ukraine, President Poroshenko, as well as the things that are underachieved are also the results of Petro Poroshenko?
Not only Petro Poroshenko, of course. In Ukraine, you have this system where executive power is divided between president and government. And government depends, of course, on parliament, because majority of reforms have to be done through change of legislation. Legislation is passed in the parliament, which means we have these three centers of power, and it is very important. And there is responsibilities on all these three centers of power, for both, for achievements and positive results, and also for negatives. But I have to say that despite it was possible to do much more, and despite I understand dissatisfaction of people and frustration of people, on the other side it is necessary to say that it was done a lot. And for the first time after Revolution of Dignity, for the first time in Ukraine, it is changing the system. I mean, this old oligarchic, corrupted, non-functioning system is changing towards functioning market economy. In some areas, as we said, it is really big achievement. In some areas, it is necessary to do much more.
Well, recently, the majority of Ukrainians voted for another presidential candidate rather than Petro Poroshenko. That is our new president-elect, Volodymyr Zelensky. And the G7 ambassadors called on Petro Poroshenko to ensure the smooth transmission of power from Petro Poroshenko to Volodymyr Zelensky. Now, in your opinion, how possible is this transmission, judging by the fact that Volodymyr Zelensky has no political experience whatsoever, unlike Petro Poroshenko?
Firstly, I think I'm optimist in this regard that it will be smooth transition, because we have seen that one of the really, really good achievement is that elections have been really free and fair. And it was really, really achievement, especially if we compare with some other countries. Which means I expect now, we know that also it was agreed consensus on the inauguration date, which will be next Monday, which is another very positive news, positive signal. Which means I don't see any obstacle for smooth transition from this point of view, formal transition. Another question is, of course, that third point is that new President Zelensky received a really, really strong mandate for the changing the country, which means I expect that he will use this mandate for continue in these areas in which there are positive results, and especially for speeding up these areas which are insufficient progress until now. And he declared this, especially to change the system, to do real de-oligarchization, to do really law enforcement progress, judiciary reform, fighting against corruption. I expect that if he received such strong mandate and if he promised this, that he will do. Very important is with whom he will cooperate, because I agree with you that he is not experienced politician. He's coming not from the political area, which is good on one side, because those kind of people have more kind of chance and ability to change the system. But disadvantage, of course, is that if he doesn't have experience and he's coming to the political arena, it could be disadvantage. Very important will be with whom he will cooperate, what kind of team he will create. In this regard, you know, my experience being here almost 5 years is that if you want to do real reforms, you have to do them with young, new people who are ready, able, and eager to do system. And Ukraine has a lot of this kind of people. I'm not saying about people without any experience, but Ukraine during last years have a lot of, let's say, 30, 40 years old people who served in government, in parliament, in NGOs, in media. Ukraine has a lot of those kind of people who can really change the country.
Well, hopefully those young people who can change the country will come on the team of new President-elect Volodymyr Zelensky, and Ukraine will stay on the path of its reforms. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
That was Ivan Miklosh. He's the chairman of the Strategic Advisory Group for supporting Ukrainian reforms. Thank you so much for watching UATV. Stay tuned for more.